I came back from my trip and found the album with every picture of me torn out, and a note, "Worst grandmother in the world." On Monday, I delivered an envelope containing the deed, which states, "Only those who care for me until my last breath will inherit the house." I stood frozen in the doorway of my bedroom, my suitcase still gripped in my hand, as I stared at the mess on my bed. My family photo album lay open, but something was terribly wrong. Every picture that had me in it was methodically torn, leaving jagged edges where my face should have been. 50 years of memories, my wedding day, holding my son as a baby, my 60th birthday celebration, all destroyed in what must have been a deliberate act of cruelty. My hands trembled as I picked up a small folded note placed prominently on top of the mutilated album. "Worst grandmother in the world." The childish handwriting belonged to my 12-year-old grandson, Tyler, but I knew immediately he hadn't done this on his own. This kind of calculated meanness had my daughter-in-law Brenda's fingerprints all over it. I sank onto the edge of the bed, my legs suddenly too weak to hold me. The trip to visit my sister in Florida had been my first vacation in years, a desperately needed break after months of feeling increasingly unwelcome in my own home. Now I understood why David, my son, had been so supportive of me taking this trip. They had wanted me gone to execute this. Whatever this was. "Mom? You're back early." David appeared in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to calculated blankness when he saw what I was looking at. "What is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I held up the note, not trusting myself to say more without breaking down. David crossed his arms defensively. "The kids are upset. They feel like you don't care about them. You're always criticizing how Brenda raises them, always talking about the right way to do things." I stared at him in disbelief. After everything I'd done, after raising him alone when his father died unexpectedly of a heart attack, after working 2 jobs to put him through college, after helping with the down payment on this very house, this was how he saw me? I've never once criticized how. "You don't have to say it out loud, Mom. It's how you look at us, how you sigh when the kids eat dinner in front of the TV instead of at the table. And now you take off on vacation while Tyler had his big soccer tournament. You know how important that was to him." My mind raced. The tournament? But that's next weekend. I made sure I'd be back in time. I even bought him new cleats as a surprise. I gestured to the still unpacked suitcase where the gift was tucked away. A flicker of something, guilt perhaps, crossed David's face before his expression hardened again. "They changed the date. I texted you about it." I reached for my phone, scrolling through messages. "There's nothing here about any date change, David." Instead of responding, he turned away. "I need to pick up the kids from school. We can talk about this later." After he left, I sat alone in the silence of my room, trying to understand how we had arrived at this point. The tears finally came. Not delicate, dignified tears, but painful, body-racking sobs that left me gasping for air. This house had been in my family for generations. When my husband Robert passed away 25 years ago, I'd sworn I would maintain it as a place of warmth and security for our son. Later, when David married Brenda, I'd offered to move out, to give the young couple their privacy, but they had insisted I stay, David seemingly out of genuine affection, though now I wondered if his motivations had been more financial than filial. I'd tried so hard with Brenda, keeping my opinions to myself, helping with the children whenever asked, retreating to my room when they wanted family time. Somewhere along the way, I'd become a stranger in my own home, tiptoeing around, trying not to be a burden. The worst part was the children. Tyler and his 9-year-old sister Emma had once adored their grandmother. We'd baked cookies together. I'd attended their school plays and sports events, read them stories at bedtime. But in the past year, they'd grown increasingly distant, and now I understood why. What had Brenda and David been telling them about me? I wiped my eyes and stared at the torn photographs. Family had always been everything to me. The thought that my own flesh and blood could see me as the worst grandmother in the world cut deeper than any physical pain I'd ever experienced. By evening, I still hadn't seen the children, though I heard them come home. Dinner was a muted affair, with David telling me they'd already eaten at a friend's house. Brenda stayed in the kitchen, visible through the doorway but deliberately keeping her distance. That night, I lay awake, replaying conversations and incidents from the past few years, seeing them in a new, disturbing light. The way Brenda would make suggestions about assisted living facilities for people your age. How David would casually mention friends whose parents had done the right thing by selling their homes to give their children a head start. The sudden interest both had taken in the housing market in our neighborhood, where property values had skyrocketed. They wanted my house, the house where David had grown up, where I had spent my married life with Robert, where I had lived for almost 50 years. And they were willing to turn my own grandchildren against me to get it. The realization didn't come with fresh pain, but rather a cold clarity that kept me awake until dawn. By morning, I knew exactly what I needed to do. I called my lawyer as soon as his office opened. "Richard? It's Margaret Wilson. I need to make some changes to my will, and I'd like to do it as soon as possible." 2 days later, I had an envelope in my hands containing a new deed to the house, one with very specific conditions about inheritance. I placed it carefully in my handbag, my heart heavy but my resolve firm. Only those who care for me until my last breath will inherit this house, I whispered to myself as I prepared to deliver news that would change everything. The next morning, I found myself at the kitchen table before anyone else was awake, nursing a cup of tea and watching the sunrise through the window. This had been my ritual for decades, these quiet moments before the house stirred to life. I thought back to when Robert died suddenly at 42, leaving me a widow with a 17-year-old son. The shock had been overwhelming, but I hadn't had the luxury of falling apart. David was about to start his senior year of high school, with college applications looming. He needed stability, not a mother drowning in grief. So I had packed away my pain each morning before dawn, sitting at this very table, gathering my strength for the day ahead. I'd taken on extra shifts at the hospital where I worked as a nurse, then added weekend receptionist work at a local dentist's office. The double income had been enough to maintain the house and save for David's education. "You don't have to do this, Mom," David had said when he found out about my second job. "I can go to community college or take a year off." "Absolutely not," I'd told him firmly. "Your father wanted you to have every opportunity, so do I." And he had excelled, earning a scholarship that, combined with my savings, had allowed him to graduate debt-free. I'd attended his graduation ceremony alone, saving the empty seat beside me for Robert's spirit, knowing how proud he would have been. After college, David had moved back home temporarily while starting his first job. Those had been good years, the two of us finding a new rhythm as adults sharing a home. When he met Brenda at a colleague's wedding, I had been genuinely happy for him. She was ambitious and confident, qualities I admired. If she seemed a bit cold toward me, I chalked it up to nervousness. "She's just intimidated by you, Mom," David had assured me. "You're this strong, independent woman who raised a son on her, owned and maintained a beautiful home. Give her time." But time had only widened the gap. After their wedding, when they decided to move in with me rather than find their own place, I'd offered to convert the first-floor den into a bedroom for myself, giving them the master suite upstairs. "This house is too special to sell," David had said. "It's where I grew up. I want my kids to grow up here too." I sighed, running my finger along a crack in the old wooden table. When had David's appreciation for the home I'd maintained transformed into entitlement? When had our family home become a property he saw as his inheritance, an asset he was impatient to claim? The shift had been so gradual I'd barely noticed it happening. After Tyler was born, I'd reduced my nursing hours to help with childcare. By the time Emma arrived 3 years later, I'd fully retired to become the primary caregiver while David and Brenda built their careers. I'd loved those early years with my grandchildren. We'd established traditions, making pancakes in animal shapes on Saturday mornings, reading stories in the window seat of what had once been David's bedroom, planting a small vegetable garden in the backyard. But as the children grew older, Brenda had increasingly restricted my role. My offers to help with homework were declined. My suggestions for activities were dismissed. Slowly, I was being edged out of their lives. The sound of footsteps on the stairs broke my reverie. I quickly wiped away a tear I hadn't realized I'd shed. This was no time for self-pity. I needed to be strong, strategic. As I heard David and Brenda's hushed voices from the hallway, I clutched the envelope in my pocket, the one containing the new deed that would force them to reveal their true intentions. Tomorrow, I would show them that a lifetime of sacrifice had not left me powerless. Tomorrow, they would learn that love wasn't just a word. It was a choice made daily, proven through actions, not merely claimed as a birthright. I chose a moment when we were all together for Sunday dinner. It had become a formality rather than a family tradition. Brenda's food served with precision but little warmth, David checking his phone between bites, the children quiet and watchful. I'd made apple pie, Tyler and Emma's favorite, hoping it might soften whatever harsh words were to come. "I need to talk to you all about something important," I said, as I placed the envelope beside my plate. David and Brenda exchanged a quick glance. "Is everything okay, Mom?" "You're not sick, are you?" David asked, a hint of genuine concern in his voice that gave me pause. "I'm perfectly healthy," I assured him. "This is about the house." Brenda's posture stiffened visibly. "What about the house?" "I've been thinking about my will, about what happens to this place after I'm gone." I kept my voice steady, watching their reactions closely. After finding my photo album last week, I realized I needed to be clearer about my intentions. "Mom, that was just a misunderstanding," David said hurriedly. "Tyler was upset about missing you at his game. Kids do impulsive things sometimes." I turned to Tyler, who was staring down at his plate. "Is that true, Tyler? Did you tear up all those pictures of me?" His eyes flickered toward his mother before he shrugged uncomfortably. I was mad. "Tyler, don't talk to your grandmother about this now," Brenda interjected sharply. "We've already discussed it as a family." "That's just it," I said quietly. "I don't feel like part of this family anymore." The blunt words landed like stones in still water, sending ripples of tension across the table. "What's in the envelope, Margaret?" Brenda asked, her tone crisp and businesslike. I slid it toward David. "It's a new deed to the house. I've transferred ownership to a living trust. The terms are simple. The house goes to whoever provides care for me in my final years. Whoever stays with me until my last breath." David's face paled as he pulled out the document and scanned it. "You can't be serious. This is emotional blackmail." "Is it?" I asked, surprised at how calm I felt. "Or is it simply asking for the care and respect I've given freely all these years?" "We've always planned to take care of you," Brenda said, her voice rising slightly. "But this kind of legal manipulation? Is that why I overheard you last month telling David it might be time to look into more appropriate living arrangements for me?" I interrupted. "Is that why you've been having the real estate agent Sarah Jenkins over when you think I'm at my book club?" Their stunned expressions confirmed what I'd suspected. They never thought I was paying attention. "Grandma?" Emma's small voice broke the tense silence. "Are you going away?" I reached over to squeeze her hand. "No, sweetheart. This is my home. I'm not planning to go anywhere." "This is ridiculous." Brenda pushed back her chair abruptly. "Children, go upstairs and finish your homework." After they left, David leaned forward. "Mom, You have to understand. Housing prices in this neighborhood have tripled. We're drowning in debt from Brenda's graduate program and the kids' private school. We were just exploring options. Options that didn't include discussing my future with me, I pointed out. Because, "You're so stubborn," Brenda burst out. "You refuse to acknowledge that at your age this house is too much to maintain. We were trying to be practical." Practical would have been having an honest conversation. I stood up slowly. "The deed is filed. The decision is made. If you want this house, show me that you deserve it through your actions, not your words." I walked out, leaving my uneaten pie behind. Through the dining room window, I could see Mrs. Abernathy watering her garden next door. She waved, and I managed a small wave back. In 50 years of living side by side, she'd seen my highest joys and deepest sorrows. She'd also witnessed, with increasing concern, how my family had been treating me lately. Upstairs, I heard Brenda's raised voice, though I couldn't make out the words. I didn't need to. Her anger was palpable, radiating through the floorboards and walls that had once sheltered a happier family. I knew the battle lines had been drawn. What I didn't know was whether my desperate gamble would heal our family or destroy what little connection remained. The next week was a masterclass in emotional manipulation. Brenda swung between icy silence and forced pleasantries that rang hollow in our echoing home. David seemed torn, his eyes betraying conflict whenever he looked at me, though he sided with his wife in every conversation. The most painful transformation was in Tyler. At 12, he was old enough to understand the power dynamics at play, but too young to resist being weaponized in this family war. He stopped acknowledging my presence entirely, walking past me as if I were invisible. Emma, however, was a different story. At 9, she was still guided more by her heart than by the politics of adult relationships. I caught her watching me, with confused, sad eyes as I watered my houseplants or folded laundry. One afternoon, as I sat on the porch swing, she tentatively approached. "Are you really the worst grandma in the world?" she asked, her voice small but direct in that way only children can manage. I patted the seat beside me, and after a moment's hesitation, she climbed up. "What do you think, Em? Do you think I'm a bad grandma?" She kicked her legs back and forth, considering. "Mom says you're trying to control everybody, that you think your way is the only right way." "And do you see me doing that?" Emma shrugged. "I don't know. I just remember when you used to read me stories and make those special pancakes. And now everything feels different." I felt a lump form in my throat. I miss those times too. "Mom says we might have to move because you're being selfish with the house." Her blunt words hit like physical blows. Before I could respond, Brenda appeared in the doorway. "Emma, I've been looking everywhere for you. Your piano teacher will be here in 20 minutes. Emma slid off the swing, throwing an apologetic glance my way before hurrying inside. Brenda lingered, her expression cold. "I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't try to turn my daughter against me," she said. "Is that what you think I'm doing?" I asked quietly. "Because it seems to me that's exactly what you've been doing with my grandchildren." "You brought this on yourself, Margaret. We were perfectly willing to take care of you in your old age, but on reasonable terms. Not with this. Emotional ransom. Note you've created. Taking care of me was never part of your plan, Brenda. You've been researching nursing homes in other states. Did you think I wouldn't find out?" Her face flushed. "That was preliminary research. Nothing had been decided." "Nothing had been discussed," I corrected. "With me, the person whose life you were planning." "This house is wasted on one elderly woman," she snapped, dropping the pretense of politeness. "Do you have any idea what we could do with the proceeds from selling it? The opportunities we could give Tyler and Emma? And what about my opportunity to live my final years with dignity in the home I've maintained for half a century?" I asked, surprised at the steadiness of my voice despite my racing heart. Brenda's laugh was brittle. Dignity? Is that what you call this power play? David is devastated. He always thought you loved him unconditionally. My love is unconditional. My house is not, I said simply. That evening, David confronted me in the kitchen as I washed dishes. Mom, this has gone far. Enough. Brenda and I talked and we're willing to make a compromise. We'll set aside some money from the eventual sale of the house for your care, a generous amount. I turned to face him, drying my hands on a kitchen towel. So your plan is still to sell my home out from under me? It's the family home, he insisted. Dad would have wanted… Don't you dare tell me what your father would have wanted. I cut him off, my voice sharper than I intended. Robert built this life with me. He watched me maintain this home and raise you after he was gone. He would be ashamed of how you're treating me now. David's face hardened. That's unfair. What's unfair is being treated like a burden by my own son, I replied. What's unfair is having my grandchildren turned against me because you and Brenda want my property. We've made financial decisions based on the assumption that this house would eventually be yours, I finished for him. Well, it still can. Be? The terms are simple. Care for me with respect and love, and the house is yours when I'm gone. Is that really too much to ask? He didn't answer, just stood there with frustration etched across his face. A face that looked so much like Robert's. It made my heart ache despite everything. The doorbell rang, breaking our standoff. It was Mrs. Abernathy, holding a covered dish. I thought you might like some company in my chicken pot pie, she said cheerfully, pretending not to notice the tension. To my surprise, David stepped back. I'm sure you two have a lot to catch up on. I'll be in my office if anyone needs me. After he left, Mrs. Abernathy placed the pie on the counter and fixed me with a concerned look. Things still rough? I nodded, suddenly too exhausted to maintain the facade of normalcy. You did the right thing with that deed, she said firmly. My sister went through something similar, gave everything to her kids too early and ended up in that awful state facility. As we ate pie at my kitchen table, I noticed Emma watching us from the hallway. I waved her over, and after glancing around to make sure no one was watching, she slipped into the kitchen and accepted a small slice. The three of us ate in companionable silence, and for the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. Perhaps not all bridges had been burned after all. 3 weeks after I'd presented the new deed, Emma's secret visits to my part of the house had become a regular occurrence. She would slip in during the afternoon lull when Brenda was at her yoga class, and David was still at work, ostensibly to borrow books from my shelves, but really to spend time in the calm atmosphere of my sitting room. Why does Mom hate you so? Much? She asked one rainy Tuesday as we sat together by the window, watching droplets race down the glass. I don't think she hates me, I said carefully. I think she's afraid. Emma looked skeptical. Mom's not afraid of anything. Everyone's afraid of something, sweetheart. Your mother is afraid of not being able to give you and Tyler the best of everything. She's afraid of not measuring up to her own expectations. Is that why she wants to sell the house? To get money for our stuff? Children could cut through layers of adult pretense with disarming simplicity. Partly, I admitted, but it's more complicated than that. Emma twirled a strand of her hair, a habit she'd had since she was a toddler. Tyler says we're moving to a bigger house where we won't have to share a bathroom, and you'll go live somewhere else with other old people. The casual cruelty of the word stung, but I kept my expression neutral. Is that what you want, Em? She shook her head emphatically. I like our house, and I don't want you to go away. Who would help me with my science projects? I smiled, remembering the volcano we'd built together last month, a project Brenda had initially dismissed as messy and pointless until Emma won first prize. Can I tell you a secret? Emma asked, her voice dropping to a whisper. Of course. I snuck into Mom and Dad's room and saw some papers. They owe a lot of money to the bank. Mom was crying about it. This confirmed what I'd suspected. Their lifestyle was outpacing their income, even with both of them working good jobs. The private school tuition, the luxury cars, the vacation home they'd timeshared in Aspen. It was all a facade built on financial quicksand. That's grown-up stuff, Em. You don't need to worry about it, I said, though my mind was racing with this new information. But they want to take your house because of it, she persisted. That's not fair. Before I could respond, we heard the front door open, Brenda returning early from yoga. Emma's eyes widened in alarm as she slipped quickly out the back door of my sitting room, which led to the garden. That evening, I received an unexpected visitor, Clara Jenkins from my old hospital. Volunteer group. We hadn't spoken in months, not since her husband's funeral. Margaret, I hope you don't mind me dropping by, she said, standing somewhat awkwardly on my porch. Ruth Abernathy mentioned you might need a friend. I invited her in, touched by the gesture. Clara had been a pediatric nurse when I worked in the maternity ward. We'd bonded over difficult shifts and shared lunches in the hospital cafeteria for nearly 2 decades. Over tea, I found myself telling her everything. The photo album. The hostile environment, the new deed. It was a relief to speak openly with someone who had no stake in the outcome. You were always too generous, Clara said firmly. I remember when David was in college and you were working those double shifts. You never complained, not once, even. When you were so exhausted you could barely stand. He was worth it, I said reflexively. Yes, but does he know that? Does he understand what you sacrificed? She leaned forward. Margaret, I'm on the board at Riverside Community Center now. We're starting a senior advocacy program. Someone with your experience would be invaluable. I don't know if I have the energy for volunteer work right now, I admitted. It's not just volunteering, it's creating a support network. Too many seniors are isolated, vulnerable to family pressures or outright elder abuse. Her eyes held mine steadily. What you're experiencing, it's more common than you think. The word abuse made me flinch. It's not that bad. Emotional manipulation, financial coercion, isolation from social supports, Clara ticked off on her fingers. Margaret, if this was happening to one of your patients, what would you call it? I had no answer. As Clara was leaving, Tyler came home from soccer practice. To my surprise, he paused in the driveway. Hi, Mrs. Jenkins, he said politely, recognizing Clara from community events. Hello, Tyler. My goodness, you've grown since I last saw you. How's the soccer team doing this season? We're undefeated, he said with a hint of pride. Then, unexpectedly, his eyes flickered to me. Grandma used to come to all my games. Perhaps she'll come to your next one, Clara suggested lightly. Tyler shrugged and continued into the house, but not before I caught a glimpse of something in his expression. Uncertainty, perhaps, or the first crack in the united front his parents had constructed. The next morning, I found a schedule of Tyler's remaining soccer games slipped under my door. That Saturday, without telling anyone, I took a taxi to the soccer field. I sat on the far side of the bleachers, watching as Tyler's team battled against their rivals. When he scored the winning goal, I couldn't help standing and cheering along with everyone else. After the game, as families gathered around their young athletes, I stayed back, unsure of my welcome. But Tyler spotted me and, after a moment's hesitation, jogged over. You came, he said, his tone somewhere between accusation and surprise. I've always loved watching you play, I said simply. He scuffed his cleats against the ground. Dad says you're trying to control us with the house thing. I'm trying to protect myself, Tyler. There's a difference. He looked up, his eyes, so like Robert's, searching my face. Mom and Dad fight a lot about money. She says it's your fault for changing the deed. The problem started long before that, I said gently. Adults sometimes make financial decisions that cause stress later. Like the new car, and my private coaching. His perception surprised me. Those things aren't bad, Tyler. Your parents want the best for you. But we can't afford it all, can we? His directness was startling. That's why they want to sell the house. Before I could respond, Brenda appeared beside us, her expression thunderous. Tyler, go wait in the car with your father, now. Once he was out of earshot, she turned on me. How dare you come here and fill his head with your perspective? This is exactly the kind of manipulation I'm talking about. I didn't say anything. Against you, Brenda. I came to support my grandson at his game, something I've done since he was 5 years old. Stay away from my children unless I'm present, she hissed. Or I'll make sure you never see them again, house or no house. As she stormed off, Mrs. Abernathy approached from the neighboring field where her grandson had been playing. That didn't look pleasant, she observed. It wasn't, I admitted. Well, I have something that might cheer you up. The Neighborhood Association is having a fundraiser next weekend, a community dinner. Several of us were hoping you'd come. Everyone misses your famous apple pie. The invitation was more than just a social event. It was a lifeline being thrown to a drowning woman. I'd love to, I said, realizing how isolated I'd become in my own home. What Brenda didn't understand was that while she might control my access to my grandchildren temporarily, she couldn't erase the community connections I'd built over 50 years, connections that were beginning to reawaken, offering me strength for the battle ahead. Chapter 6. The True Legacy. The community dinner at the Riverside Center was a turning point. I arrived with my apple pie, nervous about attending a social event alone after so many months of isolation, only to find myself surrounded by familiar faces and genuine welcome. Former patients, old neighbors, fellow church members, all greeted me with warmth that stood in stark contrast to the cold atmosphere at home. Margaret, we've missed you at the gardening club meetings, said Eleanor Peterson, squeezing my hand. Your hydrangea tips saved my flower beds last summer. Is that famous Wilson apple pie? Called out Frank Cooper, who had been our mailman for 30 years before retiring. My wife's been trying to recreate it for decades without success. The evening reminded me that I existed beyond my role as mother and grandmother. I had an identity, a community, and worth that had nothing to do with the house that had become the center of such conflict. Clara Jenkins found me as I was serving pie, slices. I have someone I'd like you to meet, she said, introducing me to Barbara Winters, a lawyer specializing in elder rights. Barbara volunteers with our senior advocacy program. We chatted briefly about my situation, with Barbara offering me her card. Just in case you need guidance, she said kindly. Family situations can get complicated, and it helps to have someone in your corner. I tucked the card into my purse, hoping I wouldn't need it, but comforted by the option. What I didn't expect was to find Emma waiting on the porch when I returned home. Grandma, she whispered urgently, I need to show you something. She led me to her room, carefully checking that her parents were still out at their dinner engagement. From under her mattress, she pulled out a crumpled paper, a foreclosure warning from the bank regarding their vacation timeshare. I found this in Dad's office, she said. Are they going to take our house too? I sat on the edge of her bed, troubled both by the document and by Emma's involvement. Sweetie, this is adult business. You shouldn't worry about these things. But they're using it to be mean to you, she insisted. I heard them talking. Mom said once they get your house, they can fix everything. I gently took the paper. Emma, I'll handle this. But promise me you won't take any more papers from your dad's office. That's not your responsibility. She nodded reluctantly. As I tucked her in, she asked quietly, Can I still come visit you even though Mom said I can't? Your mom wants what's best for you, I said carefully. But my door is always open. The next morning, I made a decision. Instead of continuing this cold war, I would face the situation head on. I called David at work and asked him to come home, for lunch, alone. He arrived looking wary, but agreed to sit with me at the kitchen table where I'd placed 2 cups of coffee and the foreclosure notice. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his face paling. "That's not important. What matters is that you're in serious financial trouble, and you've been hiding it from me while pressuring me about the house." David put his head in his hands. "It's not what you think, Mom. The timeshare was supposed to be an investment. We got in over our heads, but it's manageable." "Is it? Because this isn't the only problem, is it? Emma and Tyler's private school, tuition, Brenda's student loans from her MBA, the new cars. It's all adding up." "So you're spying on us now?" His defensiveness was telling. "I'm trying to understand why my son, who I raised to be honest and direct, is manipulating his own children against their grandmother instead of simply asking for help." The blunt words hung between us. For a moment, I glimpsed the boy David, had once been uncertain, vulnerable, wanting to do the right thing but not knowing how. "I didn't want to disappoint you," he finally admitted. "You worked so hard to give me everything. I wanted to do the same for my kids, to make you proud." "Oh, David," I sighed. "I've always been proud of you, but not because of what you provide. Materially. I'm proud when you show integrity, when you're kind, when you face problems honestly." Something shifted in his expression. "What do you want me to do?" "Meet with a financial advisor, a real one, not whoever told you that timeshare was a good investment. Figure out what you actually need, not what you want to project to the world. And stop trying to solve your problems by taking my home." "And then?" he asked cautiously. "Then we can talk about how I might help, as your mother who loves you, not as a property to be acquired." He nodded slowly. "I should have just talked to you." "Yes," I said simply. "You should have." The next few weeks brought gradual changes. David and Brenda met with a financial advisor. They began the process of selling the timeshare at a loss, painful but necessary. Tyler started coming to sit with me in the evenings sometimes, working on homework quietly in my sitting room. Emma's visits became more open, less secretive. Brenda remained cool but civil, no longer actively undermining my relationship with the children. One evening, I overheard her arguing with her sister on the phone, defending the decision not to move me to a facility. It wasn't affection exactly, but it was a step away from hostility. Meanwhile, I found new purpose through the senior advocacy program. Twice a week, I volunteered at the Riverside Center, helping other elderly people navigate family conflicts, housing issues, and healthcare decisions. My nursing background and personal experience proved valuable in ways I hadn't anticipated. 6 months after I'd changed the deed, I made another decision. I invited David, Brenda, and the children to a family dinner, this time prepared by me. In my kitchen, the heart of the home that had sparked so much conflict. Over home-cooked food that carried memories of happier times, I handed David a new envelope. "I've amended the trust," I explained as they all watched me with apprehension. "The house will still go to whoever cares for me in my final years. But I've also established a foundation with some of my savings, the Margaret and Robert Wilson Family Support Fund. It will provide educational grants for Tyler, Emma, and any future grandchildren." "Mom, we don't expect," David began. "This isn't about expectations," I interrupted gently. "It's about legacy. Your father and I always believed in education as the greatest gift we could give. This continues that tradition." For the first time in over a year, I saw tears in my son's eyes. "We've been so wrong about everything," he said quietly. Brenda reached over and took my hand, the gesture awkward but sincere. "I thought you were holding on to the house out of stubbornness. I never understood it was about dignity and respect." "It's about family," I corrected her. "Real family, the kind that faces challenges together instead of looking for someone to blame." That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I sat on the porch swing where Robert and I had spent so many evenings, watching the neighborhood change over decades. The house would continue without me someday, but what mattered was the love it contained, the memories it preserved, and the lessons it taught about what truly constitutes wealth. My home was never just about property value or inheritance. It was, and would always be, about creating a space where love could flourish, even when that love required difficult truths and painful growth to fully realize.